Hey everybody, it's Dave, Blue Jacket 66 here for another video. I'm going to try to make this one not go too long, although it might. I've always wanted to do a video on auction houses and kind of walking you through it, and I never did, and partially just out of it, I didn't know if I wanted to spend all the time putting all that together. I really don't like editing videos, so this one's going to be me referring to some paper stuff, and I'll be putting some things to look up on the screen. But what interested me most was, rather than talking about auction houses, is going through some of the fine print on some of these auction houses and some of the surprises that are within the fine print. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, but I am going to talk about just some basics of auction houses. A lot of you don't use auction houses. I don't know why. In general, that's where all the best cards are. Far better than it most shows, I think, to be honest with you. And I feel like you get a fair shot at getting a card at a fair price. There's a lot of auction houses out there, and I know it's intimidating, but it's really easy to sign up. You just go to their website and you register. They really don't ask for much. Sometimes they ask for some references, but you could give me as a reference or give your eBay ID as a reference. It's no big deal. I've never heard of anybody turned down from an application to an auction house. Some of the upper end auctions, and I've only seen this with like Goldin and perhaps Leland, is they went for their premier type auctions. They want some sort of proof that you can pay, bank statements or whatnot. I've never done that, and I'm not going to ever do that. But most of the other auction houses, it's a pretty much easy sign up. And once you bid for the first time in them, you can start receiving their auction catalogs and whatnot. So the why of these auction houses is just because there's a vast amount of cards out there to look from, and I really think that that's where all the premier cards are. I mean, there's certainly at shows too, but if you go to a show and there is a 49 leaf Jackie, there's a lot of them out there, but there's the price on it. You can negotiate a little bit, but I prefer buying things through an auction house where I feel that I'm getting what the market says rather than what a dealer says. I do trust auction houses. I'm going to list them here. These are just some of the auction houses. If you want to, when I try to figure out what auctions are going on, I go to auctionreport.com, and they have a pretty extensive list of auctions, specifically auctions that are going on at that time or active. Also, if you go to the old cardboard site, they have a link to auctions, and neither of those are complete. So you just kind of got to get them in your mind, what auctions you'd like to bid in. The ones I have listed here is certainly an incomplete list, but they're the ones that came to mind, and I believe I've bid in most every one of them. And auction houses are similar in many, many ways, but there are nuances and differences, and I think that that's what I want to talk about. Then I'm going to get to also within some of these little surprise fine print that they have, and some of them are not great, to be honest with you. So I can't talk about every auction house, so I picked out some that I'm familiar with. Some of them are my favorite, some of them are not my favorite. But what I did is I printed off their user agreements. This is Goldin's user agreement, and so I printed it off. It's like 16 pages long. There's a lot of legal stuff in it and compliance, and we're not responsible for this, we're not responsible for that. But there's useful information in here that we're going to go about each of these auctions, specifically their bidding process, their fees, their buyer premiums, their taxes, etc. So I printed off the user agreement for Goldin, Heritage, which is some serious fine print here. Multiple pages of that. So those are another ones we're going to talk about. Memory Lane, Love of the Game, Huggins and Scott, and Hunt. And I really just, I wanted to use Goldin, I wanted to use Heritage, Love of the Game, and REA because I use them a lot of them. But the others, I just kind of pick, and we'll just see just some of the differences with them. So primarily when I looked at this user agreement, I was just going through what are some red flags, and or interesting things. Like here's Heritage. That's page. This is really, really fine print. I can't even see it. Page 1 and 2. Some things that drew my attention. I go, there's 16 pages of Goldin, and I found a couple things in that. But for the most part, it's common sense stuff that they expect you to pay, that they're not responsible for this or that, and that PSA or SGC or third-party graders, if you get a card and it's in a 4 and you think it's more of a 3, they're not responsible for that, etc. A lot of really useful information regarding shipping, payments, their processes, etc. And I really highly recommend that you read those user agreements before you do bid. So the first one I wanted to talk about is on these auctions. It's very simple. You sign up, the auction opens at a certain date, and there's a period of bidding. Heritage is crazy long. I mean, they can be 4 weeks is a bidding. Most of them are like 2-week auctions, and you can bid on your item. And the nice thing is because of the information in the computer, they'll send you updates from time to time on just reminders when the auction closes, what your bidding is, if you're still winning or losing. But one thing people want to know is, how do these auctions end? And that's one thing that kind of separates all these auctions from each other, is how they close. Because eBay has this closing, it's a hard close. The time's down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the auction's closed. These auctions don't do it like this. And I'm going to put up a little something here that kind of walks you through the closing times. And every auction, I have to review their closing times because they're confusing and they're all different. The first thing, closing time, is how they close is Goldin. Now, Goldin, every single one of these auctions has a bidding period where they open their auction 2 weeks before, you bid up, and then on the day it's closing, they will quote unquote close at a certain time and go into extended bidding. And what that is you can bid on any lot at any time up until the first close, but in extending bidding, you can only bid on items that you've already placed a bid in. So if we're well into the auction, we're into extended bidding, and I find a card, I didn't see that before, I can't bid on it because it's extended bidding. Then after extended bidding is when each of these will close in their own way. So Goldin Auction, they have their period of bidding, and then they go into their extended bidding, where only people that have bid on a card may continue to bid on that card or any item that they've already bid on. And then their close is really a late night close, because in extended bidding, all lots stay open until no lot has received a bid for 30 minutes. That's going to be an all-nighter. That's one of those that is not going to close till 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Who wants to do that? I hate that way of doing it. But essentially, normal bidding, extended bidding, and then the auction closes when no card in the extended bidding has received, or no item in the extended bidding has received a bid for 30 minutes. So that's going to end up being an all-nighter, because someone will just sit there at 2 o'clock in the morning, let it count down on the card they want, put in another bid, and then it resets, and all the lots in the auction resets. Heritage does it a little bit different. And I like the way that Heritage does it, although it doesn't always help me out a lot. What they do is they have their regular period time of bidding, where you can place a bid on any item you want, and then extended bidding begins for a period of time. What I like about them is in their extended bidding, they close lot by lot. So once you get into extended bidding, you can only bid on lots, again, that you've already bid on, but they close lot by lot. So if a item does not receive a bid within 30 minutes of extended bidding, that closes. Other lots will go on, and people will be bidding on those. But each item individually, if it hasn't received a bid for 30 minutes, it will close. And that can burn you sometimes. Let's say I have 3 cards that I want to bid on in extended bidding. And one of them I really want. And I'm kind of bidding on all these, but I can't afford all 3. And the one that I really want, I'm bidding on it, and I'm go a couple hours into extended bidding. Finally, it's just too much. I can't bid on it. So I drop out of that and I go back to the other 2. Well, lo and behold, they close. They didn't receive bids for 30 minutes. So that way of closing, sometimes you can miss out on cards. But that's Heritage way of doing it. Robert Edwards Auction is a little bit different. They have their regular bidding, and then their extended bidding, I believe, begins at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And again, you can only bid on items that you've already bid on at that point. And they tend to, what they say is based on their previous auctions, usually around 12 midnight Eastern time, they're probably going to close. So, and they really do. They really hold you to that. They don't want you bidding up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, the way some of these are. So I really like the way Robert Edwards Auction does it. You can bid on any item, then extended bidding at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can only bid on lots you bid on. And if a period of 10 minutes passes without any lot getting a bid, the entire auction closes. But that tends not to happen, so they end up closing around midnight Eastern, which I think is fair. Memory Lane, that's another all-nighter. They essentially have bidding, and then their extended bidding doesn't end until no item in their entire auction has received a bid for 15 minutes. So this auction goes all night long. They go all night long into their early morning hours. Love of the Game, it has something called a double overtime. I don't really like it, but it is what it is. They have their regular bidding, then they have their extended bidding with, again, another 15-minute rule for the entire auction, which means they will remain open until no item in the auction receives a bid for 15 minutes and they close. Well, that's not going to happen. So I believe at 1 a.m. what happens is if an item hasn't received a bid for 30 minutes, they close individually. And if you want to keep on bidding on your item well into the early morning hours or the next day, you can, as long as you put in a bid every 15 minutes. So I'm not really wild about that. Huggins and Scott, and I think similar type thing. You can see on the graphic I put up there how they do it. Again, regular bidding, extended bidding, etc. Their website it's terrible auction website in my opinion, and they have it printed out how their auction closes, but even with that I couldn't even figure it out. The bidding increments are kind of similar from all the auction houses for another. Some of them raise each bid by 10%, but most of them have these pretty fair increments. Whatever that may be. So That's not a thing. Before you bid, you can see what the next bid's going to be. You can also put in a max bid, which means, let's say you don't want to, you've got a party that night, your kid's got a birthday, you don't want to stay up late, and you trust the auction house, and it's a item worth $500, and you really want it, but you can't stay up and watch it and bid along. So you're just going to put in a max bid of $550. You can do that. So you have the opportunity to do this, put in a flat bid and see if it gets raised or not. And they will notify you. All these auction houses notify you on whether or not you've been outbid or not and what your standing is. But you can put in max bids if you trust the auction house. A lot of people just, they don't trust the auction house, no matter how reputable, because these auction houses, some of them have the ability to see what your max bid is. And we learned that with Legendary Auctions, where they knew what your max bid was and they shilled it. That's why they went to jail. But that doesn't mean other people can't do it. I don't really like putting in max bids. I've done it. I prefer to kind of stay up and get a feel of the auction. And I'm a lot of times bidding on more than one item, but you can put in a max bid. What about if you win the auction? This card is a $1,000 card and you're happy because you won it for $1,000. That's great, but these auction houses, they do have buyer's premium, which I'm putting up a graphic here, which means on top of the hammer price, you will be billed a premium, which is some extra. That's what really goes to the auction house. I mean, if it's $1,000 item, no matter what price it is, and you win it for $1,000, that $1,000 goes to whoever the consignor was. But there's a buyer's premium that goes to the auction house. And as you can see, most of them are about 20%. So if you win something for $1,000, you're going to get, your invoice is going to add that buyer's premium at $200. You're going to $1,200. Goldin is a little more, as you can see, whatever is 23%, and Hunt is down at 15%. Other auction houses are definitely lower. I don't think, maybe some of them are as low as 12%, but generally the bigger ones are around 20%. Their form of payment is typically check, cashier's check, wire transfer. If you do a wires transfer, they get the money immediately and they're going to get you your item sooner. But if you send a check, you're probably not going to get your item for 3 weeks because they will hold it, and it takes a while for your payment to get there, them to process it, etc. So you always got to figure in the buyer's premium. So if you don't want to pay more than, if you think it's $1,000 item, you probably don't, and that's all you really want to pay. You don't want to bid $1,000 because you're going to owe on top of that. So you want to bid, $850 or $900 because you're going to owe 20% on top of that. Don't forget taxes as well. Always use the user's agreement to see if that auction house charges you for your state taxes. Some of them, as you can see, Goldin and I think Hunt tax you state tax for where you live, no matter where you live. Some of those other auction houses, as you can see, only do sales tax to certain states. And, that's going to add up too. That's going to add 5, 6, well, it depends where you live, % more on top. And Goldin, interestingly, they tax your not only do they tax your buyer's premium, they tax your shipping fees. That's a kick in the groin, I'll tell you right there. And they don't really tell you that I saw, at least in this user agreement, what their shipping fees are. I'm putting up a little graphic about shipping fees. As you can see, a couple of them don't really say what their fees are. The others that do, I think they're pretty reasonable. Love of the Game comes right out and says in their user agreement they don't make a penny on shipping. They're kind of charging you what it costs, and you can see their shipping fees look good. Robert Edwards Auction used to not charge a penny to ship the item, and that includes insurance and shipping. But I think it became a little costly to them, so a couple years ago they started charging for that. But again, that looks reasonable. So you got your hammer price, plus your buyer's premium, plus your taxes, plus your shipping fees. So if you think you got a deal buying a $1,000 card and the hammer price was $900, in reality you're probably paying a little above that. So always take that into consideration. Let's get down to some of these user agreements and some of the things that I thought, and this is going to be difficult because I made slides that I'm going to put up here of some of the things I highlighted. And the fine print is so fine that I don't even think that me putting up on the screen you may be able to read it. So I'm going to go through each of their auctions, user agreements, and 99% of the user agreement seems, as a non-attorney and not a document guy, reasonable to me. But I want to go through each of these auctions and show some of the things that I thought were a little peculiar. This is the kind of buyer beware. So let's go through Goldin first, and I'm running through their bidding and whatnot, and let's get through this bidding. And here's something that I've highlighted here. The first one, Goldin may place bids below the reserve on behalf of seller, either consecutively or in response to other bids. So if a consignor has a reserve, they don't have to tell you that Goldin. They don't have to tell you that there's a reserve on that. You don't know that. Let's just say it's a $1,000 card, and for some reason the consignor says, I want a reserve of $700 on that. Goldin may place bids. Goldin's going to bid. They can bid on this below the reserve on behalf of the seller, either consecutively or in response to other bids. So you may not know this card has a reserve, and you're bidding on it, and the bid's going up and up, but that could be Goldin bidding on that item to bid it up toward the reserve. What do you think about that? That Goldin, the auction house themselves, is putting in bids on that card to build it up toward the reserve. I'm not wild about that at all, but it's in their user agreement. They're not hiding anything. Next thing on Goldin, the officers, directors, and employees of Goldin and its parent company and affiliates, including eBay, may bid in an auction so long as the individual does not know the reserve. So they may bid in an auction or consign items on the Goldin website as an individual collector outside the scope of their employment. So what they're saying here, as I read it, the employees, directors, employees, officers, etc. of Goldin, they can bid in the auction. What do you think about that? And their own employees or whatever can consign items. Now, if you work for an auction house and you want to sell some stuff and you want to consign it, it doesn't make sense that Goldin's employees are going to have to consign things to Robert Edwards Auctions. That makes sense to me. They can consign, but they shouldn't be able to therefore bid. You got me? That you agree? I don't think they should be able to bid in an auction, but I don't see anything restricting them from doing so. So they can consign items to the auction and bid in the auction. Okay, let me see anything else on Goldin that I saw. Let me just run through their user agreement. Okay, that's about it, I think, for Goldin. Okay, let's move on to Heritage to see if there are any. And this is such fine print that I can't even read it. But here's some things I found in Heritage's user agreement. We'll go to this first one, conducting the auction. And it's so wordy. What are they saying here? But it says, Notice of the consignor's liberty to place bid on his lots in the auction is hereby made in accordance with Article 2 of the Texas Business and Commercial Code. Let me repeat that. Essentially, they're saying the consignors can bid on their own lots. I think that's what it says, in accordance with the Texas Business and Commercial Code. We call that shill bidding in Florida, but that's how I read that. Maybe I'm reading it incorrectly. The next thing down here says, any successful bid placed by a consignor on his property. So they're saying that a consignor in Heritage, it's okay for them to bid on their own items. It says, any successful bid placed by a consignor on his property on the auction floor by any means during the live session or after the minimum bid from an auction had been posted will require the consignor to pay the full buyer's premium or seller's commission. So, in other words, if you bid and buy and win your own item, you still have to pay all the commissions. I don't want to really bid. Heritage, I bid in their auctions a lot. They've got great stuff, but holy cow! Let's read this next one. In Heritage, the auctioneer, which is Heritage, reserves the right after the hammer fall to accept bids and reopen bidding for bids placed through the internet or otherwise, regardless of placed bids. Auctioneer reserves the right to withdraw any lot or any part of a lot from an auction at any time prior to the opening. So let me go with this first part. The auctioneer, Heritage, reserves the right after the hammer falls, so after the auction's closed, to accept bids and reopen bidding. Huh? Yeah, read the fine print on this stuff. That's crazy, but that's what you can do in Heritage. Let's find another one. Here's another one that I thought was odd. Ooh. Lots bearing bidding estimates shall open at the... let me see if I even know what I'm saying here. Lots bearing... Oh, here we go. Lots bearing bidding estimates shall open... a lot of times they put estimates on what the item is. They'll have an item and they'll say estimate 5 to 10,000. So what they're saying here is lots bearing bidding estimates shall open at the auctioneer's discretion. In the event that no bid meets or exceeds that opening amount, the lot shall pass unsold, or the auctioneer may place protective bids on behalf of the consignor. Let's say something is estimated to be a $5,000 bid or a $5,000 item. And it's not getting bids and it's looking like it may sell low. This is saying, it says here, that the auctioneer may place protective bid on behalf of the consignor. You wonder why some of these cards in some of these auctions, you see them over and over again. Maybe it's because the auction house is winning the cards. That's how I read it. Okay, let's do another one in Heritage. Heritage has a lot of highlighting here. From time to time, the auctioneer, Heritage, its affiliates, or their employees may consign items to be sold in the auction. Again, I don't think I really have a problem with that. They work for Heritage. It makes sense that they want to sell items. They do it from their auction. But I don't think that they should be bidding in it. However, the next line says, from time to time, the auctioneer, its affiliates, or their employees may place bids on lots in the auction. So let's see. Heritage employees or Heritage can put their own items in their auction, and they can bid on them. The great state of Texas. Let's see what else we got here. the auctioneer, Heritage, has the right to sell certain unsold items after the close of the auction. Such lots shall be considered sold during the auction. That's okay too. I remember what they're saying is, let's say an item does not sell, doesn't get any bids, doesn't sell. After the auction closes, they still have the right to sell it. How they do that, I don't know. I do know that once years ago in Huggins and Scott, I won an item, and I noticed that in another item that I was interested in, it was actually an uncut sheet of 49 Bowmans, didn't get any bids, or it didn't sell. So I called him up and I said, can you see if the consignor would, I think, let's just say the opening bid was $1,000. I said, and it didn't get a bid. I called them and I asked, will you see if the consignor will take $800 for it? And they called me back like 2 hours later and said, yeah, we'll just sell it to you for that. So that's cool for me. Let's move on. Okay, REA. Here's their user agreement. It's several pages. You can find these user agreements on their websites, and a lot of times they're in every auction catalog. So good, useful information here about how you bid, opening, closing, how you register, minimum bids, bidding increments. They too do not offer where you can top all bids, but you can put in a max bid. So I do have something highlighted for Robert Edwards Auctions. Let me see what I highlighted there. Oh, consignors are prohibited from bidding on their own material or having others secretly bid on their behalf. If a consignor directly or indirectly bids on his items in the auction, it is without REA's consent, and REA reserves the right at sole discretion at any time and without warning to remove the bids it's suspected being fraudulent or placed in a consignor. So they're saying, consignors, you're not bidding on your items, unlike what we've seen in others. Okay, the next thing I highlighted from REA, there is no circumstance in which Robert Edwards Auctions may execute bids on its own house account, therefore unfairly competing with bidders. Unlike Heritage, who says we can bid on anything we want in the auction. In fact, to be clear, Robert Edwards Auction does not even have a house account, unlike many other auctions. Under no circumstance may any employee or Robert Edwards Auctions place bids in the auction on their personal accounts. Employees of Robert Edwards Auctions may consign their personal property to the auction. Any lots consigned from the personal collections of the employee will be fully disclosed at request. Okay. So I didn't really find anything controversial, but I did highlight that because that is a little bit different from what we're seeing on some of these other auctions. Okay, Memory Lane, here's their big user agreement. Again, a lot of these user agreements are the same, walking you through all these processes, but they got tiny, 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 tiny print here. Let me see what I highlighted. Okay, that they do have a top all bids, which means you can either place a max bid, you can place just a straight bid, but you can click a top all bids. It says top all bids are welcome and held in the strictest confidence by Memory Lane. That takes some big kahunas to click top all bids, because you don't know if there's some maniac out there who've put up a crazy number because you really went on it and now you're going to top it. Let me see. I highlighted something else. It's so small. Let me just try to read this. Memory Lane prides itself on seldom having to execute reserves on behalf of clients. On the rare occasion that a confidential reserve is initiated, I don't know. What it's saying is they do have some hidden reserves, but rarely have that. That's no biggie. So really nothing crazy in memory lane, although they have some hidden reserves. All right, love of the game. Let me see if anything there highlighted. One is their shipping statement that says we do not profit from shipping, and it goes along with their shipping schedule. And they too, kind of like Robert Edwards Auction, were kind of proactive on their integrity and what they can and can't do. They, in their user agreement, there's several things I highlighted, and I'm not being biased. I really highlighted everything that I thought was of interest or that was questionable or is opposite of what other auction houses are doing. They say we cannot see max bids. We do not have access to max bids in any way. We do not have a fancy brand name for this. We just call it integrity. The next, they say consigners may not bid on their own material, and they have a right to cancel any bids. They have a right to decline consignments. If we believe a consigner or his proxy is placing bids on his lots, the love of the game is the sole arbiter of this decision and can essentially negate it. Love of the game says we do not have hidden reserves. On occasion, on high value items, we'll institute a reserve to protect the consigner, but 1 week prior to the auction closing, they'll disclose the specific dollar of what that reserve is. Another thing they do here, and this may be questionable for some of you, but they say, when we disclose the reserve, the current bid will be set to one increment below the reserve amount. So let's say there's an item that's being bid on that has a reserve. A week before that the auction closes, they'll say, hey, the reserve on this item is $1,000, and they'll automatically bid that increment up to one bid increment below that, $900. So the next bid on that will hit that reserve. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know why you just don't start, why this reserve? I guess it's so people are bidding on it and interested. But if you have an item that you can sign and the minimum you'll take is $800, why don't you just do the starting bid at $800? Rather than this hidden reserve and this reserve thing. But they never, Love of the Game says there's never a hidden reserve. It is policy to disclose whether an item has a reserve, and they're right in the description of that item. So they will a week out say there is a reserve on this, and they'll bump it up to near that reserve. So you're not going through a whole auction and the auction ends because there was a reserve and you didn't know it. One other thing on Love of the Game, let's see here. Love of the Game Auctions. Its owners, employees are not permitted to bid on any lot in the auction under any circumstances. Bidders are not bidding against any house account. There is no house account. Okay, let's go to Huggins and Scott. I'm not sure when how old this user agreement is, but you remember Huggins and Scott is now under the REA umbrella. I did find some things on their user agreement. Let's see what I found here. Select lots may have a confidential, which means hidden reserve, placed on them by the consigner, which means that the lot will not be sold until a bidder bids an amount equal or greater to that reserve amount. The reserve notification may not post to a lot until the auction in progress as late in the auction as on or about 24 hours prior to the final conclusion. So they don't let you know till there's a reserve till late in the auction. So they'll tell you if a reserve is not met. What else do I got here? No consigner bids. Consigners are prohibited from bidding on their own materials or having others secretly bid for them. That's important to say. And they'll remove any items. No house bids. Huggins and Scott says there is no circumstance in which Huggins may execute bids on its own house account, therefore unfairly competing with bidders. In fact, to be clear, Huggins does not even have a house account. Employees of Huggins and Scott may consign their personal property or owned items to the auction, provided they will be treated like any other consigner. Means you're not bidding on your lots. And it says any lots consigned from personal collections of any employee of Huggins will be disclosed upon request. Then we'll go to Hunt. Hunt's it's just difficult. I always look through their stuff, although it's difficult to do. It's just difficult to maneuver their website. It's just terrible. And their user agreement is equally terrible. I don't know what to say. The only thing I highlighted here was reserve bids may be executed on catalog lots on behalf of the seller and shall be executed confidentially in a manner similar to execution of absentee bids. So I think the auctioneer can bid on those items up to the reserve. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line, I think, is these people, some of them are too big for their britches, and they don't give a crap about you. Others are smaller and give a big crap about you. But I don't think any of them want to risk their reputation by trying to pull the wool over your eyes or try to cheat consigners or cheat bidders. I really don't think that, because lessons learned, people have gone to prison for this. But I do feel, to be honest with you, and I do not want a bunch of questions about who I feel has the most integrity and who I like bid. I'll just tell you right now, I love Love of the Game. I love REA. I love Sterling. Brockelman Auctions has huge integrity. Collectors Connection does. But I bid with Heritage. I think they're a big powerhouse and don't give squat about me. And if I call them with a complaint, nothing happens. But those are my favorites. I have some that I do not 100% trust, and I just don't. I've had some experiences that I think substantiate that. I don't want to go into that. So that's kind of the deal. I would really encourage, if nothing else, it's fun looking through the auctions. Robert Edwards Auction just opened up a catalog today. New auction going. Heritage has a big auction ending in December. There's just great, it's eye candy, great things to do. They all have descriptions that you can read and learn about the issues and whatnot. So it costs you nothing to sign up. You can bid, you can not bid, you can. But I think it's a good play rather than wandering around all these. Going to shows is fun, but it's not necessarily fulfilling. When one of these big auctions, when a Heritage premier auction opens, or a REA spring, summer, fall, winter big auction opens, they all have little ones in between, but when the big ones open, I'm really excited about that. There's always great stuff in it. So that's about it. Go ahead, let me hear some of your thoughts. Again, I'll give some opinions if you ask, but I'm not going to call anybody out per se. And again, I just went over a few auction houses when there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of them out there. And that one of the first slides, I had a list of it, just some of them. And there's certainly a lot more out there. And I didn't skirt them for any particular reason. I just knocked off a few off the top of my head just to make the point that there's more than a few of them out there. So, all right. Have a good weekend. Thank you.